Rubius is busting out their IDS rule.
Right, so they were on one of only 2 teams. We know Xandra and Rubius deployed IDS rules, not heavily and not complicated IDS rules, but one of those IDS rules was one that just blocked the magic page, right?
Yeah, that was the predominant rule in use, was if the POV is sending traffic that has the flag page address in it, block that traffic.
So it's sort of the simplest pattern match, just hard-coded value. It's like antivirus of yore that is like the easiest to evade and avoid.
You'd think it would mess more things up than it would solve.
Yeah, you can
and they
easily
do use it sparingly.
You could easily false positive if there just happen to be those bytes in the payload, or if a challenge binary author included that address.
Yeah, and so it turns out that throughout the rest of the length of the on-sale challenge, Galactica never again scores against Rubius.
So that was it. That Rubius had the final say.
They took out their code execution with the NX stack, and then they took out their ROP payload with the IDS rule.
Yeah, this is I think the most important story of the whole thing, as I said earlier, because not only is this automated attack and defense back and forth, but it's happening so fast. This happened in the minimum time possible. These rounds are 5 minutes long, and oftentimes in the same round where the data is being exposed to them, they're responding, which means we know they had less than 5 minutes, and as short as 30 seconds maybe even. So that's incredibly fast, far faster than any human could react.
The scoreboard in round 64, Mayhem is still on top.
Of course, they're on top, but we are starting to see a little bit of a relative dip here now, right? I think we're seeing that lead, that over 9,000 point lead has definitely decreased. And so now it's getting a little bit smaller. Still pretty solid, though. I don't think they're in any danger of being overtaken anytime soon.
I think this right here is real interesting with Rubius and Mechafish still kind of very tightly battling it out for third place. And this is important because third place was a money-winning position.
Yeah, third and fourth is still a really big battle. And certainly Mechafish was actually in contention for second up until that big dip, and they haven't been able to kind of claw their way back up, but third and fourth is quite tight. I think if we look at it too, it's the story has been for Mechafish a lot of time we've commented is their availability and the patches that we keep seeing them do, and you can definitely see that the green there is going to be the trend for them, and that's what's hurting them now. I think their other numbers are much better. I think they've got a better evaluation, but if they can't,
we can see on these lines down here that their security and evaluation are nearly the top.
Yeah, in fact, I think they probably are the top for both of those. They have the best, at least tied with Xandra for security, but the top evaluation. But in this case, Rubius has got a little bit better availability, though still not as good as Mayhem, who clearly has the dominant availability.
Yeah, we keep seeing that being such an important component of the game. The scoreboard in round 67. Now, 67 is an important round because this is the first time that we had official confirmation that Mayhem was really dead in the water.
Yeah. So
we had seen that early on in the game, they had been throwing a lot of POVs, they've been taking a lot of action, and then we see after that, for a while now, they've not been throwing new POVs, they haven't submitted any replacements, they just kind of haven't been doing anything. Now, they're still in the lead, but their lead is shrinking, and they're just sort of coasting from the position they were at.
If something happens with your CRS and a part of it goes down, do you have any contingencies in place to mitigate that?
Yeah, in our CRS, we built in parts that would, for example, completely reboot VMs if it seemed like they weren't performing and restart systems. So we made heavy use of essentially reboot and pray approaches because our own systems, we've designed them pretty well, but you have to make them fault tolerant.
How many actually pieces do you have that you have to maintain their running?
Yeah, there's a bunch of different pieces in this, right? So we have an offense, we have a bunch of different fuzzer symbolic executors and a bunch of VMs devoted to that. And we prioritize how many resources go to that. For defense, there's patching, that's a little bit more lightweight, but then there's the CRS part, the thing that binds it all together and makes the decisions. And for that, that's kind of the most difficult to protect against because it's kind of one centralized piece that just has to work.
You kind of had an all hands on deck, let's audit the game so far moment.
The conversation at that point was mostly about what's your confidence level? How certain are you? Have you looked at everything?
Didn't Caswell go all the way up to the interface with Mayhem?
We tested every interface to the degree that we could. We didn't have, administrative insight into their CRS. We had opportunities all the way up until that edge to do different types of testing.
In this case, the event plan, which all three of us had worked on that week and we had committed to publicly before the event, was extremely clear. Disaster recovery only happens if there is a hardware-induced or framework-induced failure. And the result of Tim's game pause and audit and all his team's work was there was no hardware-induced or framework-induced failure. Mayhem had simply stopped playing the game, and we had to allow it under the full autonomy directive to be an autonomous system, and sometimes that means autonomous systems fail.
Now, thankfully for them at least, in this particular game, doing nothing isn't the worst strategy. Because you're not churning, you don't lose in availability, you're actually doing okay, but it really depends on how often your opponents are throwing successful POVs at you, because opponents who POV you decrease your security score, increase their evaluation score, and if they're patched, they're also increasing their security score. So it really depends on sort of the ratio of how many POVs are being thrown. In a very POV-heavy game, they would lose that lead very quickly, but if the POVs are kind of slowing down a little bit, which up until now I think sort of the last third or half that we've seen a little less POVs than we saw at the very beginning. So if those POVs pick up, the pace could change. But for now anyway, they're still hanging in there. And they did build up a very solid lead with very good availability, very good evaluation. They had, while they were alive, we did see the best evaluation out of them as well. So they have a big lead to work from.
Yeah, that lead was definitely helping them along.